Are you guys, Kate and Rachel, are you ready? We're all good? Okay, great. If people trickle in, that's okay afterward. So we're just gonna go ahead and get started. I will do a little intro and then I'll hand it over to our wonderful presenters today. So my name is Rosie Briggs. If you don't know me, we all work for EcoCycle. I run the Eco Leaders Network, which is a big, fun network of over 900 folks who are, we call them eco leaders, and they're basically ambassadors in their communities. Wherever they work or play or interact with people, they're a resource for zero waste and sustainability information. And they get trained by me. And then there's a whole bunch of ways to be involved, but there's no kind of minimum requirement. So if you'd like to be involved with that, I will send out a link in our follow-up email for you to sign up. If you did sign up like today and I haven't gotten back to you, I sure will. But this is what we call an Eco Leader 2.0 training. So we have these every month or every other month, depending on quarantine and how it's going and all of that stuff, all those factors. And each of the trainings covers a different sustainability, zero waste topic, just a deep dive, because there's so much stuff that we could talk about. And every time I'm training someone on recycling, I'm like, we could spend 2 hours on just this. And so that's what we're doing. So past trainings include things like microplastics or what's going on with China and the plastic markets. We did circular economy. We talked about where all of our resources actually come from upstream, like what's aluminum made out of. We have all of these different topics. They're all really interesting, I think. And today we're doing one that was actually a lot of people requested it. And I'm really excited about it. It's extended producer responsibility. So we have Kate Bailey and Rachel Setzke here, our wonderful, my wonderful coworkers from EcoCycle. We also have Ari here, who is another wonderful coworker at EcoCycle, and she'll be doing kind of the behind the scenes stuff, and Rachel and Kate will be presenting today. So we're very excited, all of you, because it's a webinar rather than a meeting on Zoom. All of your cameras are off, all of your microphones are off, but you can interact with us. We have a chat. So if you look down on the bottom on your little bar, there's a chat button and you can click it to interact with your other folks. And then there's a Q&A button, which is all the way on the right. And you can use that to actually ask questions, and we can organize it so that we can answer those questions and mark them when they've been answered. Sorry, I'm jiggling here. And so we'll have breaks to ask questions, but you can kind of like chat in the chat during, and Ari and I will be paying attention to that. So that is all I have as an intro. And with that, I will hand it over to Kate and Rachel. Thank you for coming, and let's sit back and learn about extended producer responsibility, or sit forward. It's so interesting. Let's go.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the intro, Rosie. And thank you everyone for joining us. I am speaking on behalf of all of us, just absolutely flattered to see the number of people who are choosing to spend their Thursday night learning about extended producer responsibility. We of course love learning about it at EcoCycle and really relish this opportunity to share. So thanks for taking the opportunity to join us. I know that we have many folks who are outside Colorado even, and so just wanted to clarify that we're going to talk about extended producer responsibility for packaging, and it's going to be pretty broad most of the time, and then we are going to talk a little bit specifically about Colorado, but it will be very useful for anyone who is joining from around the country. And as Rosie mentioned, love to hear from you in the chat. Tell us where you're from, what you want to hear about, all that good stuff, and questions in the Q&A. We are going to keep it pretty interactive. Rachel and I are going to talk for a little bit. We're going to do some polls. We're going to stop and pause for questions along the way. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Really excited tonight to talk about systemic change. So there's a lot we can do as individuals to improve recycling, a lot we can do in our communities, but extended producer responsibility is really targeting the whole recycling system. And what can we do to really transform the system so it really functions better, more efficiently, more sustainably, and really set up recycling for success in the long term. So with that, we're going to dive into, you're going to hear us call it EPR throughout the presentation, so extended producer responsibility. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about what that is coming up. So with that, we are going to start with little bit about Rachel and myself, actually. So many of you know Rosie, you know all the great work you do as eco leaders. Thank you for all your great work. Many of you know EcoCycle from the Charm and dropping off your hard to recycle materials. Some of you may have kids, and we've got our schools program teaching kids how to recycle and compost. Maybe some of you are at a business and EcoCycle picks up your recycling or your compost. So many different ways to interact with us. And one of those is through our policy and research department. So Rachel and I are a small but mighty team, and we help really support a lot of the initiatives that we do at EcoCycle. So we spend a lot of time looking at what's happening in recycling, both around the state, around the country, around the world, and trying to learn about best practices and cool stuff and innovative ideas, and what can we bring back to Boulder and Boulder County and Colorado, and how can we improve our programs. And then on the flip side, we also spend a lot of time talking about the cool stuff that you do as eco leaders, that EcoCycle has done over the past 45 years, and sharing those lessons learned with other communities. So really our work focuses in 3 areas. So locally, we work to help cities implement and improve policies and programs, and we pull a lot of best practices from around the region. Many of you may know us from our State of Recycling and Composting in Colorado report. At the state level, we're also looking to advise and develop state policy, testify down at the state legislature, draw the connection between recycling and climate, really helping to improve Colorado's dismal recycling rate. And then lastly, at the national level, EcoCycle has a pretty big reputation for just a small group of folks in Boulder County. It helps that we have been in the recycling business for 45 years. So we do a lot of thought leadership on why recycling is important, how we get to our zero waste future. We advocate for recycling. We work a lot with brands, consumer companies. We work around the supply chain to really help look at how do we improve recycling as a whole. And we do that with a lot of different partners, but one of them in particular is the Alliance of Mission-Based Recyclers. So we work with our 3 other nonprofit recyclers to really help advance recycling. So with that, just a quick bit about ourselves. I have been the Policy and Research Director at EcoCycle. I've actually been at EcoCycle since 2003. It's been a wild ride, and actually started at the Charm window. So I was Charm window part-time and answering phones, and I've played a variety of roles in my career at EcoCycle, and just feel so fortunate that I am able to represent EcoCycle around the state and around the country. This photo is me speaking in Brazil, where I got to go and talk about EcoCycle's programs as a model. So really encourage you to be proud of yourselves as eco leaders, that you are a model for places all around the world. I am a CU graduate. Environmental studies is my background. And if I'm not talking about recycling, I'm usually talking about hiking, gardening, or women's soccer. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel.
Thanks. So this is not me speaking in Brazil. This is actually in the mountains with my dog. I'm the Senior Policy and Research Associate at EcoCycle. I've been here since August of 2019. I have been working in the nonprofit sector for over 20 years, including a stint at the Colorado Nonprofit Association. And most recently, I graduated from University of Colorado at Denver, getting a certificate in environmental management, policy, and law. And when I'm not doing recycling, I'm hanging out with my kids, playing games, cooking, reading, camping. And that's me. So thanks everyone for coming tonight. We are really excited for how many people are here to hear about EPR, extended producer responsibility. It's a huge topic, and we hope that we will give you a solid overview of the main points, particularly when it comes to EPR for packaging. We hope that by the end of this evening, you'll have a strong understanding of how EPR could improve recycling, examples of where EPR is already working, and some excitement for EPR, especially here in Colorado, and how you can help to move it forward. So before we dive into EPR, let's put a little context on it. Many of you are probably familiar with the idea of creating a circular economy to replace our current unsustainable take, make, waste linear economy. In a circular economy, as you probably know, products are designed to be used as long as possible through durability, upgrades, and repairs. And when they do reach the end of their lives, they should be easily disassembled and otherwise recycled into new products. By creating a circular system, the amount of raw materials needed is vastly reduced, and so are the environmental and social impacts of the extraction and waste processes. And as you can see here, recycling is just one small piece of the circular economy, but it is an important piece, and it's one we've been working to develop for decades. So certainly recycling is fundamental to our circular economy, but as you also know, recycling has been through some pretty tough times in the recent past. While many people think that China is to blame for our recent turmoil, it's actually more complicated to that. And the backstory is that really China was just a tipping point. There was a perfect storm of problems brewing, and in recycling for over a decade that's helped to set this off. Recycling levels had flatlined across the US. We had a lack of investment in US markets and those end users to use the recycled materials. And we had increasing amounts of contamination, partly caused or largely caused by proliferation of plastic packaging. We also had limited access, or still do have limited access to recycling across the country. And all of this has made for a challenging past few years in recycling. And the positive side of that, though, is that this has brought unprecedented national attention to the problems facing recycling, and with that, a tremendous amount of interest and funding into truly moving forward towards towards systemic changes that will make recycling more effective and more economically and environmentally sustainable in the long term. So just like recycling is only one part of the circular economy, EPR is just one of the tools that we need to help reform our recycling system. There are a lot of other policy tools that complement EPR, such as single-use plastic bans, carbon taxes, procurement standards that would require governments to buy recycled products, and other tools. Tonight, we're going to focus just on EPR. EPR policies have shown around the world that they're able to sustainably fund increased equitable access to recycling for all residents and to simplify recycling systems. EPR policies can also incentivize producers to create products that are less environmentally harmful. EPR policies vary, but this slide really shows the way that all EPR policies directly benefit the recycling system. The boxes in bright blue are those ways that it directly benefits the system, such as sustainably funding equitable access, education and material streamlining, infrastructure funding, and guaranteeing a material stream. In the light blue, you see ways that EPR policies can also affect and positively affect the recycling system in a less direct sort of way. So as we think about improving recycling, it's critical to remember why we recycle to start with. When we talk about recycling, we often frame it as a way to reduce waste going into landfills. And that's absolutely true, but it's so much more than that. First and foremost, recycling is about responsibly managing our resources and addressing climate change. Using recycled materials is a proven way to reduce energy consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, and is one of the most cost-effective strategies we have to fight climate change. It also helps to reduce air and water pollution, which protects our environment and our public health. It's about environmental justice, reducing the materials we extract, process, and throw away, relieves the disproportionate burden our current consumptive behaviors place on low-income communities and communities of color. Recycling is about building resilient local economies. Recycling materials instead of landfilling them can keep those materials in local economies as feedstock for manufacturing. This reduces dependency on outside markets and makes local manufacturers more resilient. Recycling creates 9 times more jobs than landfills on average. Colorado throws away more than $160 million worth of valuable resources that could be kept in local economies. So this brings us to our first poll question. What recycling policies are you excited about? And we're kind of excited about the polls because this is new to us. So give us a sec with our technology, and Ari will hopefully get that poll up in a sec.
Clicked launch, but it doesn't look like it's showing.
Do we need to stop? Yeah.
I stopped my share. Did that help?
There we go.
Great. So we're looking for your feedback on what recycling policies you've heard about and you feel most excited about. So go ahead and select your favorite answer. We'll give folks a minute here to chime in. Quick plug again for Q&A box. If you've got questions as we move along, happy to take any questions at this point. We are definitely going to share the slides. So look for that coming up later, as well as some take action points to follow as well. And keep up the great chat too. Rosie, is there any other questions we should be addressing at this point?
I think we're doing good. We just had some questions here and there, but we're going to have, as a reminder to everybody watching, we're going to have little question breaks so that you don't have to hold on to your question. And again, you can put it in the Q&A at any time.
All right, Rari, can you close out our poll and maybe throw those answers up there? All right, look at that.
Nice.
High five for Ari with the tech support there. So we have a lot of great, so excited to see a lot of folks excited about EPR. So we're all on the right call. That's great. Banning single-use plastics is definitely also a big topic, and we're excited to have a plastics bill moving forward here in Colorado very soon. Banning materials from the landfill is a great strategy to increase participation in recycling and also to drive more businesses here to use our materials. Same with the bottle deposit, and better labeling on products is absolutely something we would also love to see. So yeah, really it's like a wish list, right? Can we all just make all of these things happen? Would be ideal. So let us go back to where we are. Okay, so moving forward.
All right. So before we go any farther, we want to define EPR. EPR is a mandated type of product stewardship through which producers take fiscal and sometimes operational responsibility for end-of-life management of the products and or packages they produce. Sometimes you hear the term product stewardship along with EPR. Product stewardship is a broader term that also includes voluntary initiatives for companies to take more responsibility for their products and packaging. We will focus on EPR tonight, which again is a mandatory policy. And although it's helpful to think of it more as a policy concept than one specific policy, and there are lots of variations around the world, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But in short, EPR policies require producers to fund recycling of their products and packaging. Another important term is, what is a producer? So it's one of our key words, and let's clarify that. People sometimes interchange manufacturer with producer, but that's really pretty limiting. In short, a producer is a company that makes, licenses, or imports packaging for sale, use, or distribution in a state. In most cases, you can think of this as consumer goods companies. When you go to buy a box of cereal at the grocery store, think about General Mills or Kellogg's, not the company who made the packaging for them. Likewise, we're not talking about Kroger or Safeway unless you're buying their store brand product, in which case they are the producer. So to protect smaller companies, some EPR definitions include wording that exempts smaller producers from participation based on their annual sales also.
So we've covered what is EPR and what is a producer, but most importantly, why EPR? Of all the policies that we could put into place, what are the benefits of an EPR policy? And it comes down to really 4 central things we'll focus on. First and foremost, EPR will increase recycling and will increase our diversion rate, which will increase the amount of greenhouse gas savings we have, create your green jobs. It will have all of the benefits of more recycling. And so it is fundamentally a tool to help increase and drive recycling. A big selling point for EPR is that it also helps reduce costs to local governments. So in a lot of cases, and we'll talk about some specific examples of this, local governments are paying for recycling programs. They're paying for hazardous waste collections. They're paying for drop-off centers. And that's great. Like, that's a great service that a lot of our local governments can offer, but it doesn't always make sense for local governments to be doing this. And it's also not equitable in communities that don't have a big tax base or have just other funding needs. They can't always support robust recycling programs. So government investment has definitely gotten recycling to this great point it is today, and government plays a role moving forward. But in a lot of ways, it makes sense that producers, the brands and the packaging companies who make these products are more involved with financially supporting their recycling. And a big part of that is making sure that the price of recycling is included in the product price. So I know many of you, myself included, love going to the charm, but it's also hard when you have to pay to recycle your material at the end of the day, right? You're a little frustrated that you spent a lot of money on that computer back in the day and then you have to pay to recycle it. And it's hard for us as EcoCycle to ask you to do that, but we need it to happen. It does cost us money to recycle it. So under a good EPR system, you already pay for the recycling when you buy the product in the first place. So because it's already paid for, there's money to support the recycling system. When you go to recycle it, there's no charge. And that reduces a big barrier for people and it increases participation in recycling. And then the last benefit, which is also super important, is this ability to drive greener design of products. So we've all had those moments, right? Why is this package wrapped in 6 layers of plastic? EPR can help reduce the amount of packaging, and it can also help encourage producers to choose packaging that's more recyclable by setting prices on the packaging that's less recyclable. So we'll give some great examples of that as well. So, as we mentioned earlier, EPR is not the silver bullet. It's not going to create a circular economy and solve all of our problems with recycling, but it has 4 really crucial benefits that are really going to help improve our recycling system and really create that systemic change. So EPR can also be a little intangible. So we're going to dive into a little story about EPR for paint in Colorado and help make this a little bit more concrete. And I know we're focusing on packaging today, but this is a little detour into the paint world that I think will be helpful. So many of you have been to the Household Hazardous Waste Collection, or the HMF, as they call it now, the Household Hazardous Materials Facility. So hazardous materials as paint, motor oil, chemicals, gasoline, things like that. Well, household hazardous waste programs are traditionally funded by city and county tax dollars. So here in Boulder County, we're fortunate to have a great program, but that's not true across most of the state. Many of our rural counties in particular don't have the tax base to support a household hazardous waste program. And in other counties, they just have to choose what they spend their tax dollars on. So what we've seen in Colorado is very spotty, very inequitable access to household hazardous waste. And it's really important to keep these materials out of our environment because they are toxic. There's also a problem with household hazardous waste programs when they're funded by government. And the problem is the more material you collect, the more it costs you money. So as much as you want to collect material, you're sometimes limited by your budget. So one of the things we see when we look at household hazardous waste programs is that paint is the lion's share of the materials that people bring in. Old paint cans in the garage, things like that. People bring in a lot of paint. So, about 2012, 2013, we started to look at different states that were experimenting with some policies around EPR for paint collection and looking at how that could really help things in Colorado. And EcoCycle, in partnership with Recycle Colorado and many other groups, were able to adopt Colorado's first extended producer responsibility policy in 2015. And this policy addressed paint. And what this policy did was it put a 75-cent fee on every gallon of paint sold. So if you've been to Home Depot, Sherwin-Williams, any of those stores, McGuckins, in the past 6 years, you've paid this 75-cent fee on every gallon of paint that you've purchased. And chances are you probably didn't even notice. That money that's collected goes to a group called Paint Care, which is a bunch of the big paint companies, Sherwin-Williams, Behr, those kind of folks. They've gotten together and they formed a nonprofit called Paint Care that they run and manage. Paint Care collects all of the money that we collect on the sale of paint, just in Colorado, and then they pay out to cities, to counties, to paint stores, to drop-off centers for collecting and processing and recycling paint. So this is a great example of how extended producer responsibility works. So the money is collected when you buy the product. The money is managed by a group of producers who then pay. It could be cities, it could be haulers, it could be nonprofits, whoever is in the business of collecting the paint and recycling it. So this is sort of the way that extended producer responsibility policies usually work. And as a result, we've had Paint Care now for 6 years in Colorado, and fair to say it's been a great success. So we have recycled over 3 million gallons of paint since 2015, and we see the amount of paint being recycled increasing every year. 95% of Colorado residents now have access to paint recycling within 15 miles, and many people, in fact, have multiple access points. So we've really seen a more equitable and just more paint recycling options. And we're seeing cities and counties save significant amounts of money, anywhere between $25,000 and over $130,000 per year. That's money that they were spending to recycle paint that now can be spent on roads and parks and other great city services. So paint is really a good poster child for how extended producer responsibility can work. Colorado is one of, I think, 10 states now that has these policies in place. And like I said, many of you have probably participated in it, not even knowing. So it's kind of a seamless system for those of us on the outside. And paint is a great example of the type of EPR policy that we're seeing across the US. So the US actually has 115 EPR policies across 33 states and 14 different types of materials. So those materials tend to be your hard to recycle or your toxic materials. So it includes paint, it includes electronics, it includes things that contain mercury, like light bulbs and thermostats. It can also talk about pharmaceuticals or pesticides, gasoline, things like that. But basically, these policies have focused on those materials. They're very expensive to recycle and problematic. So it's great that we've got this really strong foundation of EPR policies across the US, but you may have noticed a trend is so far nobody's talking about packaging. So that's really the next frontier for us. So we're going to build off this really strong foundation and these proven successes around the state, like around the country, and we're going to apply those same principles to talking about packaging. But before we jump there, I do want to say that we still have a lot of more work left to do for EPR for these hard to recycle materials. So our vision is ideally that when you come to the charm, that there is a producer responsibility program that has paid for the recycling of all the materials that you bring in. So that means your mattress, your old TV, potentially your clothing, some of your furniture. That really would be the model, is to have those costs embedded when you buy the product and be able to offer recycling pretty much for free when you're done with the product. So still lots of work to get there, but we're going to focus instead on packaging because there's lots of great opportunity there as well. So with that, I see we got a lot of questions coming in, so we're going to jump over and get to some of those, and Ari's going to throw up the next poll for us. Rosie, do you want to walk us through any of the questions here?
Yeah, so just while we're talking specifically about paint, a lot of people have questions about what specifically happens to the paint. What does paint recycling mean physically?
Great question. A lot of cases, paint can be reblended. So a couple things happen. So one, people often bring in half-used gallons of paint. And if you've been to the Boulder County Household Hazardous Waste Facility, you can actually go in and for free take a half gallon of paint, maybe paint your something you don't necessarily care about the color for. So sometimes it redistributes paint. Paint recycling, paint can also be reblended. So you can take different paint colors and make different colors, for lack of a better word. Not an expert on paint recycling, but they're able to reblend and reprocess and reuse many of the paint colors. Now, it's not going to be necessarily the color that you want, but if you're painting an underpass or something where the color doesn't really matter, it's great to be able to use recycled paint. Some of the paint that comes in is not reusable, some of it is toxic, all sorts of things happen. So a lot of that paint is responsibly handled. Sometimes it's burned, sometimes it's just stored in hazardous waste landfills. So good amount of it's recycled, but some of it is just safely disposed of because that's the best thing to do at this point.
And does it include, someone says, is it just oil-based paint or is it all paint?
It's all paint.
Okay, cool. So people had questions also about when you said that that we were paying an extra little bit that we barely noticed. It sounds like that's more consumer producer or extended consumer responsibility rather than producer. So people had questions about where it fell there and equity there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So really anything that we put on as a cost of producers is going to come back to the consumer. But what we see is that, so part of producer responsibility though is A, that the producers collect the money, B, they also manage and distribute the money. So they are now in charge of the paint recycling system. So that's also taken some of the burden off of local governments. So yes, there is consumer contribution to this, but it's also more fair because you have everyone who's buying paint is contributing to this program. And before you had taxpayers paying for a program that maybe not everybody was using. So it really makes more sense if you're the consumer, you should be paying for the recycling, and that should be a relationship between you and the producer, and government doesn't really need to be involved with that.
And often the producer, I mean, the paint care organization, the producers are members of that organization, and there's a fee that they pay as well to be part of that organization.
This person, Laura, says, the worry I have is that an increase in the cost of items that are packaged, like food, will increase to those who already have trouble paying for food items, creating an equity issue in itself. Is there any way to force producers to pay this cost when it comes to food items as opposed to offset the cost to consumers?
That's a great question, and that's actually built into the slides later, but I'll answer it now anyway. When it comes to packaging and the fee that's put on packaging, there have been a lot of studies that show that it's minimal. It's less than a penny per item. So the cost that's passed on to consumers is really negligible and not something that's going to cause hardship.
Let's see. So some of these I think are going to come up later, and like we can also answer them after we've covered them in the slides. So don't think I'm ignoring these. Tom says, what are virgin subsidies, which was something that came up super early.
Sure. Let me just quick flip back to the poll. Ari, can you pop up our poll results while we answer that? So virgin subsidies, great question. So virgin subsidies are the tax breaks, the different types of financial subsidies that extraction industries get, either at the state or the national level. So for example, these could be timber cutting on national forest or other national lands, where these companies are getting below market prices to access the land. They may be even getting subsidies or tax breaks to mine for trees, to mine for oil on public lands. There's a variety of different types of virgin subsidies, but the main takeaway is that some of these subsidies they make the price of products artificially cheaper. So when we talk about recycled plastic being more expensive than virgin plastic, for example, part of it is that virgin plastic is too cheap, right? Virgin plastic does not take into account the climate change impact of plastic. It doesn't include the cost of plastics pollution in our ocean. And it doesn't include the fact that oil and gas companies are getting subsidies that make it cheaper for them to produce oil and gas. So we really are looking for, a level playing field. We can't be subsidizing virgin resource extraction and expect recycling to compete in the same economics. So reducing virgin subsidies is a key tool to making recycling more economically viable. So with that, we are going to jump over to, well, first, with that, awesome questions. Great job, team. Keep them coming. We will pause again in a little bit. Meanwhile, let's jump over to our poll results. And you guys, yeah, we were like, should we throw the all of the above answer in there? Because it's kind of what we all want. So yeah, ideally we would be able to pass EPR legislation for all of these. Definitely computers and electronics is a top choice as well. We see that in the most states across the country, I think over 20 at this point. But really any of these products are a good fit because they're hard to manage, they're toxic, and we need to do a better job recycling with them. So with that, we are going to keep moving on, and Rachel's going to kick us off on EPR for packaging.
Sure. Gonna move it to the next slide. Awesome. So we've talked about EPR, and now moving into packaging and paper products, which are also often grouped together. We want to define what this means exactly. And the exact definitions of packaging and paper products, or PPP as it's often called, vary from policy to policy. But in general, it talks about anything that contains, protects, or markets a product. Packaging material is used to protect, such as cans, bottles, bags, boxes. Paper can include any type of paper made of any type of fiber. Seen ordinances that call for even like banana fiber or sugar fiber. So it can be any type of paper. It can be brochures, magazines, copying paper, or general use paper. Some EPRs only call for packaging products and not paper, but a lot of them call for both. And the most important thing to remember is that producers pay for any of the materials they put on the market, whether or not those materials are currently able to be recycled or composted or not. So that's pretty key. So regardless of what material they're using, if it's packaging or paper, they're paying for it.
Right, so really helpful for this discussion to think about packaging as all the stuff in your curbside recycling bin, or all the stuff you wish you could put in there but isn't recyclable. So why are we talking about packaging? Well, like we said, we could talk about producer responsibility for a lot of materials, but I think I'm not alone in this room to say packaging is probably the most frustrating among other things. It's also the most visible, and it's also 40% of our waste stream is packaging. Less than 50% of it is recycled, and it's much worse when you look at something like plastics, with less than 10% of plastics being recycled. We are seeing in the last few years increasing costs to recycle packaging, which has been a challenge for many programs. And we're also seeing some disturbing trends, like a lack of transparency around some of where the materials go, some of the plastics that were going to China, for example. So We covered a little bit, some of the general problems that have been hindering recycling, and certainly packaging has a lot to do with that, and even more so plastics has a lot to do with that. So that's why we're starting to focus a little bit more on packaging. And in fact, what you see is that there are 40 plus countries around the world that already have some sort of EPR for packaging. So the US, maybe not surprising, is a little behind the curve on this environmental policy, especially when you look at developed countries. We are definitely lagging behind. Parts of Europe have had packaging, EPR for packaging since 1994. So one good thing about being late to the party is that there's a lot of great examples that we can learn from around the world. So really important takeaway is that EPR for packaging is a proven success across the world. There are lots of different types of models, lots of different programs that we can learn from, that we can apply to the US. And also really important that so many of the brands, the packaging, the companies that we consume their products, your Coca-Cola, your Nestle, they're global companies. So they're already working in places where they have an EPR program. So it's not that it can't be done here, it's just that it hasn't been done here yet. And we are working to change that. So we're going to talk a little bit about our neighbor to the north. British Columbia is a great example of a place that has had EPR for packaging for a little bit more than a decade. So we are able to learn from their success. And while it's great that EPR has been working around the world, it's really helpful to be able to look just across the border to say, oh, wait, if this can work in Canada, this can work in the US. So EPR in British Columbia has been a pretty good success. They have a 78% recycling rate. Reminder, our US recycling rate is 33%, pretty bad. So we got some room to grow. In British Columbia, as a result of this system, 98% of residents have access to recycling, and they've seen over $500 million invested in recycling over the past few years because of this program. So it has been instrumental in increasing recycling rates, increasing access, and driving more investment in recycling to make the processing work better, to get the collection and the trucks out. So a couple key hints of how recycling, how EPR for packaging works in British Columbia. One of the things that it guarantees is equitable access to recycling for all residents. So one of the things that we really don't do well in this country is recycling for apartments and multifamily buildings. And I know many of you live in these complexes. I know many of you have been frustrated by this, or you have friends who've been frustrated by this. The British Columbia system guarantees that everyone's going to have access to recycling, and this includes multifamily. So it really helps increase the equity in our recycling system, something that's sorely needed in the US. It also does increases access in rural areas. So lots of drop-off centers are expanded. Since they're no longer funded by local government, they're funded by this by the producers fund. You can sustain these programs over time, and so you see these great drop-off centers in rural British Columbia. British Columbia, little factoid, is the same population as Colorado, but 3 times the size. So they really do have some pretty rural areas, but they've got some great drop-off programs, and some of those drop-off programs handle hard to recycle plastics and things like that. So a fundamental thing that EPR for packaging will do is just increase the overall access to recycling. So not just curbside recycling for single family homes, but rolling out recycling to multifamily and getting better coverage in rural areas, which is also super key for Colorado too. And I know many of you are also frustrated sometimes when you go to a different place and the recycling guidelines change, right? It's sometimes different in different parts of the state, certainly different parts of the country. And one of the advantages of producer responsibility is that you can have a streamlined system in which all the same materials are going to be recycled across the state or across the province in the case of British Columbia. So this makes it A, super easy for residents, but B, it also really increases and makes education easier, because we don't have to say, well, depending where you live, it's like, no, here are the 15 or so things that can be recycled. Here are the things you can take to a drop-off center. Here are the things we don't want. It's super clear. So it makes it easier on the education side of things. It also makes it easier for the packaging companies. So packaging companies often complain to us, well, it's hard to design for recycling because there's so many different systems. Well, if we can say, these are the things that are recyclable and these other things are not, then companies clearly have to design for what's recyclable. And if it doesn't fit into these guidelines, there's no excuse for them to design something that's not recyclable. So having this sort of standardized system has a lot of different benefits.
So another one of the really cool benefits, and one of the things we really love about British Columbia, is that having a coordinated system gives them the ability, the producer responsibility organization, Recycle BC, Recycle British Columbia, the ability to track data and improve their whole system throughout the province. Recycle BC has their Center for Material Intelligence, where they conduct highly controlled random audits of material loads. So that means as the material comes in, they'll stop a truck, and as you can see in this picture, they'll pull all of the material out and they'll sort through it to figure what exactly is going into that load, to see how much is contamination, meaning did a glass bottle get in with the paper, and how much of it is actual recyclables that should have been in there. And they can check for also how the different materials interact with each other in the recycling stream. And this has a lot of benefit for lots of different people within the recycling system. They can share this data with the haulers and the processors so that they can adjust their systems to better capture the material and to improve their outcomes. They can also use the information to inform their education campaigns so that they can address those issues that are caused by customer behavior. Like, hey folks, remember that these glass bottles can't go in with your paper, you need to put them in the other container. And finally, they can use the data to better target the products, like what Kate was saying. In particular, if a product is contaminating the recycling, they can raise the fee on that particular product so that the producers pay more on that, and they can use the information so that the producers can better understand what products can be recycled and what cannot. So this slide is actually one of my favorites because it brings us to one of the aspects of EPR that often people get really excited about, and that is designing better products, more environmentally friendly products. Under EPR, producers are charged by the weight of the packaging that they are bringing onto market. So the more packaging they use, the more they pay. That alone is an incentive for producers to reduce the amount of material that they're using for their packaging. Many policies also include what's called eco-modulated pricing to further incentivize better material choices. Eco-modulation simply means that producers pay more for materials that are more problematic. That could mean that they're harder to recycle or that they contain toxins. Producers pay less for materials that are easier to recycle and less environmentally impactful. So this example here is from Costco, or it's from Ontario. Costco redesigned their 3-pack sunscreen. Previously, they had a polyvinyl plastic with a zipper enclosure, which is both not recyclable, but it also has toxins in it. The new design has less material. You can see that there's a lot less cardboard on there than there was with the plastic that fully enclosed it. And the packaging is now super recyclable. It's also square on the corners, so it's easier to pack more of these individual units into a larger case, and that makes shipping the shipping less because you have fewer big boxes of the smaller boxes. So all around, they're saving a lot of greenhouse gases and a lot of energy and a lot of materials.
And I see a great question in there about product design. So if producers are just passing the fee along to consumers, how does it really impact their design decisions? And I think, this example is a great point, but it's important to also think that producers are very cost sensitive. Like, they are very concerned about just a couple pennies difference between them and their competitors. So when they're charged by the amount of packaging they use, and if their competitor is using less packaging, now their product looks cheaper on the shelf, they're going to lose market share. So there's definitely some competition going on between producers to be most effective in their product design, to reduce they're driven to reduce their overall costs, even though they might be passing some of those costs along to the consumer. So with that, thanks to Ari, we're going to pop up another poll question. This one about which of these benefits of EPR do you think is the most important? We've talked about design, access to recycling, things like that. What do you think is one of the biggest selling points for you or for your community? And Rosie, can you walk us through a couple questions?
Yes, I can. There's a lot. Let's see. I'm trying to find ones that fit well into these sections, and then we can like cover the broader ones afterward. Let's see. So yeah, a lot of them were, we got several comments about that upstream, about the designing thing that you just talked about. Let's see.
Rosie, while you're looking, I'm going to answer one I just saw pop up and clarify that. So the fee piece, which all EPRs, all packaging EPRs, the producers pay by the weight and the amount of material. So that is absolutely across the board. The eco-modulation and specifying different amounts of money for different types of materials, that really has to be written into the EPR, and some do and some do not, but I think most are going towards using that type of fee differentiation to really encourage better materials and discourage or phase out other materials.
Okay.
And I see a comment from Sheila about going to Germany and some of the great recycling they have there. Absolutely. Germany was the first place actually in the world to have EPR for packaging. They started in 1994. So that is why they have such a great system, is because it's producer funded. So they're able to, and they have set high recycling targets that the producers have to meet. So they've got great access to recycling. They've got great participation. So great example.
This is an interesting one that goes back to paint care. Dee says, this seems like a potential conflict of interest for producers to manage the programs when they are the ones producing those products.
My next slide hopefully will cover this. So that's a great question. And if it doesn't get it, pop it back up, but we will get there.
Okay, awesome.
And Shirley, I see, has got a question about how the money gets back to the local solid waste district. So essentially, like in Boulder County Hazardous Waste continues to run the paint collection. And then they essentially send a bill to Paint Care, and they said, we collected, couple thousand gallons, and this is the cost. And then they get reimbursed by Paint Care for that. And in some cases, Paint Care will come and collect those materials. They'll handle the transportation costs. So they're either reimbursing the city and the county for the collection costs and the staff costs, and then they're also handling the transportation and then all of the end recycling. And same thing with packaging. So it could be that the money goes back to the city or the trash hauler, and Rachel will talk about that more in a second.
Okay, I saw a question pop up about whether there was different packaging in different places, and absolutely, different policies in different places make producers have to do things different ways in different places, and so that's one argument for having larger areas under EPRs. So, conversation about having a national policy versus a state or province-wide policy would make things more streamlined.
Right, that's what I was about to say, is that several people had comments about not only universal guidelines, but federal EPR policies rather than just state by state. Or how Colorado can work with other states was another question.
Well, I saw Annie had a comment about Oregon is moving forward with EPR. So definitely shout out if you know anyone in Oregon, that is a great bill to follow. And we are supporting that, and we are also looking to learn from that. So far, there actually has been, well, we'll talk about state by state policies here in a second. We're jumping ahead of ourselves. So let's jump back in. Ari, can you close the poll out for us and see where we landed? Cool. So Rachel was right. The most exciting thing is green product design, right? It's really has to start with the producer. It has to start with how that packaging or that product is made, and is it made to be recycled or composted or reused? So definitely love to see that. Access to recycling and higher recycling rates, also critically important, reducing money, stable funding. So really, you know, EPR's got a lot of great benefits across the board, but it's definitely great to see folks really getting excited about the product design. So Rachel, we'll kick it back to you to talk about EPR for packaging in the US, taking it local.
Awesome. So now that we've talked about some of the benefits of EPR, we want to take a step back and look at how EPR really works. EPR policies all follow the same basic structure of governance. So step one is, and hopefully this answers the question that was asked, the state or the national government adopts the EPR policy, and in that adoption, they set specific goals for things like the recycling rate, what materials need to be collected, recycling access targets. So for an example, I believe it was Ontario had a target of municipalities that were 5,000 people or more had to have curbside recycling, and smaller municipalities had to have drop-off access within a certain mileage from those communities. So it's the state or local government that sets specific goals. And then the second piece of it is that the companies form an organization, a producer responsibility organization, or PRO, you've heard us say a number of times. And in the United States, those are almost entirely nonprofit, independent nonprofit organizations. And then the PRO, they're the ones that create the plan that says, this is how we're going to meet those goals that the state set up. They create that plan and then send it back to the governing body, whether it's the legislature, the Department of Health and Environment, as it would be in Colorado. And that body says, yes, we like your plan, or no, we don't like your plan, you need to fix it. Once that plan is approved, then the PRO sets the fees for what they're going to reimburse, what they're going to charge the producers. They come up with the education campaign. They actually implement the workings of the plan. So step three is that the producers, in this case, they pay a fee on the packaging, as we talked about, all of the packaging that they're putting onto the market by weight, whether or not it's getting recycled. And then step four is that the PRO actually uses those funds to provide the services that they set out in their plan, and eventually, or annually, they get back to that governing body and say, this is how well we did. This is how well we implemented that plan. And at that point, then they can adjust goals, they can adjust the program as needs to be to keep going forward and making it better. So we've talked a lot about funding and how funding works. In EPR programs for hard to recycle materials like paint, we talked about how customers pay that additional fee when they purchase their paint on their item. But under EPR for packaging, as we've talked about, the cost to recycle is actually embedded in the cost of the product. So the customers don't see an external fee. And like we mentioned earlier, studies have found that the cost per item of packaging, so the cost that you're paying on your box of cereal is so low that you're not even going to notice that it's there. It's not going to be something that shows up in the price of your item. So rather than having to pay for recycling at the end, the recycling is paid for up front, which makes it much easier for people to participate in the recycling process. They don't have that barrier like you do when you drop off your old TV monitor and you have to pay right now to recycle that. It's already paid for, taken care of. The first figure in this slide, the one up on the left, it shows how our current system works, where the consumer is really paying twice. They're paying the company for the item they buy, that box of cereal, and then they pay for the recycling services, either through taxes, subscriptions, or fees. They're paying directly to their municipality or directly to a hauler. So they're paying 2 times. Under EPR, the figure that's lower on the right, the customer is only paying once. They're paying for the item they buy. They're buying that box of cereal. And then the brand owner or producer, they're paying the PRO. And the PRO is paying the municipality or the hauler and the processor to take care of it. So it's much more streamlined and it's simpler.
So EPR, I hope you would agree, sounds like a great deal. But one of the questions we frequently get is, well, how do the producers feel about this, right? Companies probably, they've been dodging their responsibility to pay for recycling for decades. What's changed? And that's true. Companies have largely been trying to avoid paying for recycling. They have fought EPR policies in the US for decades. They have also really just tried to push voluntary initiatives, more education, for example. They don't want to invest money. But something radically has changed in the past 2 or 3 years. And it's pretty much plastic. I mean, there is such immense global public pushback on companies to do something about the plastics in the ocean, the plastics crisis that we're experiencing. And it has fundamentally change the conversations that we are having at the state and the national level. I mean, I can't even overstate how radically the position of companies has shifted in just the past few years. This has just been such a quick moving issue. But if you think about it, if you're Coca-Cola and you're the #1 brand being found on beaches in terms of plastic pollution, like, you're in the hot seat. You need to do something about this. And so we really see companies starting to come to the table, starting to talk about how we can make EPR work. I was on a call with Coca-Cola and several major brands yesterday, and I still have to pinch myself that we're talking about how we're making EPR work and not fighting over whether or not EPR is ever going to happen. So with that, I would say that perspective is not shared across the board. There's still some industries and some brands that are resisting this. I would say some of them are more like reluctantly accepting that they're going to have to pay. They already pay in a lot of places around the world and play a larger role. So it's just about bringing that to the US. And I think a lot of the companies see the writing on the wall that they've got to step forward and help rebuild our recycling system and really take this plastic pollution crisis seriously. So that's awesome. And really kudos to you and all of the consumers who have just voiced this frustration with plastic packaging. Like, it's exciting to see our voices are being heard in a really fundamental and really transformative way. So it's awesome. I will have one caveat in just that we're not there yet, right? We still don't have an EPR program for packaging in the US. There's still a lot of devil in the details in getting it moving forward. So there's still a lot of hard work for us to do. But the great news is that, the momentum has never been better and never been more optimistic about moving this forward. In fact, we have 8 states right now that have active EPR legislation and several other states that are conducting studies and looking at various things. There's been national EPR for packaging introduced in the National Break Free from Plastics Pollution Act. You can see this is states across the country. It's primarily the East and the West Coast, which is typically where we see recycling policies start. Particularly also, though, we're seeing this a lot in coastal areas because they are seeing the plastics in the ocean much more so than we are here in Colorado, for example. But really, it's really exciting to see all of these different models across the US. There was a question earlier about, should we have a national EPR system versus a state system? And, we've been talking about that, and ideally a national system would be great. It's not clear if we can get there. What we see with a lot of recycling policy is it starts at the state level, and you get a handful of states adopting policies and making them work. And then eventually you get the momentum for the national level. So, if I was to wager on it, that's the course I think we're probably going down. And really working hard to make sure that the first state out of the gate really does it right, because they're going to be a model for everybody else. So certainly if you live in any of these states, or you've got friends, folks in those states, please tell them to pay attention to this. This is really pretty groundbreaking stuff. So Colorado was not on that list, but actually we are on the map in terms of EPR. So we passed a bill a couple of years ago that required our state Department of Environmental Health, CDPHE, to conduct a study on EPR. So CDPHE is wrapping up that study now. They've been looking at EPR programs across the globe. They've been talking to different states, and they've kind of been getting the lay of the land. And they are going to be releasing policy recommendations for how Colorado can move forward. They're going to release the draft report in April, which we'd love your help getting great comments on. And then they're going to finalize those recommendations by July. And our hope is to spend the latter half of this year doing a broad stakeholder outreach to take those recommendations and move them into draft policy that we can introduce here in Colorado in 2022. So really have our eyes set on January 2022, introducing EPR for packaging here in Colorado, and super excited to be able to say that. And the reason I'm excited, I hope you're excited, is I think EPR for packaging really has some incredible benefits for Colorado. I think many of you know we have a dismal recycling rate of 16% now. So EPR will really help boost that recycling rate, and with that will help reduce our climate pollution. And a key way that EPR is going to do that is it's going to help provide recycling to more residents across the state. So those of us in Boulder County are really fortunate to have curbside recycling where we live, and even curbside composting in some cases. And it's provided alongside of our trash service. We don't even have to ask for it. But if you travel over to Westminster, Aurora, Colorado Springs, a lot of residents don't have curbside recycling. It costs more money, and they're not willing to do that. Or if you live in a multifamily property, you don't often have access to recycling, and our rural areas are underserved as well. So producer responsibility is going to create the funding and the drive to increase recycling across the state, and that's going to be pivotal for us to meet our recycling goals. And in doing so, we talked about how recycling is paid for in the price of the product. So you're not going to have to pay for recycling as part of your trash service anymore. That additional fee is not going to be the barrier anymore. So that's going to be huge for opening up recycling. So really seeing better access to services, equitable access to services, increased recycling. We talked about a lot of the benefits of having a single list of what's recyclable statewide, being able to not just have better education, but be able to tell companies you need to design. This is the system, you need to design for it. And then a big part of that is also when we increase the amount of recycling that we do in Colorado, we're going to bring more businesses to the state who are able to use our recycled materials. Right now, we've got some great local businesses like Coors and Owens, Illinois that recycle our glass into glass bottles, but they don't get enough glass from Colorado. They in fact buy glass from other states. So we're going to be able to give them more glass from Colorado. We're going to draw other types of companies like that to Colorado, boost our local economy, and create more jobs for recycling right here in the state. So lots of great economic, environmental, social benefits from expanding recycling through EPR for packaging, which is why we're excited. This is a really big systemic change for recycling and for Colorado overall. And I really want to emphasize that it's proven elsewhere, right? This is a proven solution that we are trying to bring to Colorado to tailor to our unique needs and really help it get off the ground. So with that, what can you do to help? Got 5 action items in which we would love your help. First one, actually, I'm going to ask Rosie if you want to cover how folks can help support the Plastic Pollution Act.
Yeah, actually, Ari might also have some thoughts on this. We have a Write Your Legislator form. Wow, my brain just stopped working. Where we give you a template and we find your legislator for you, and you can write to them. Ari, do you have something to add there?
Nope, I just heard my name, so I was like, I'm ready. Yeah. If you happen to be on this call and you live in House District 2, so if it's in Denver, if your representative is Garnett, Representative Garnett is also Speaker of the House, and he has the ability to introduce the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act, and he has not done that yet. So we are trying to gather folks who live in his district to also send their support, and I can make sure that Rosie gets that link for House District 2 folks, as well as the link to signing the general letter, to sending the general letter to your representatives. So make sure they get in the follow-up email.
Thanks, team. And just to clarify, for those of you, for all of us, the Plastic Pollution Act is going to be a new state bill that's going to ban polystyrene or styrofoam food containers as one of the most toxic non-recyclable plastics. It's going to ban plastic bags across the state and put a fee on paper bags to reduce bag consumption. And it's also going to allow local cities and counties to enact their own bans or fees on plastic packaging, which is currently a barrier in Colorado. So it's not directly part of EPR, but it's certainly a very complementary policy and would be a huge step forward for Colorado. So super important to get your voice out on that this week and probably for the next several months as we try to push that through the legislature. So take action on plastics. We're looking forward in April to CDPHE putting out their recommendations on producer responsibility. And we want to get a big show of support from eco leaders, from businesses, from local governments to say that EPR is right for Colorado, that we should focus on packaging, and that this will bring a lot of benefits to our state. So really want to help gather a lot of support for that. So hope you will we'll keep you posted on the opportunity to share comments and things like that as we get closer. We will then move into a pretty robust stakeholder process. So there'll be lots of time to engage in that and to weigh in on what will be the draft bill and things we can, how do we drive more green product design, particularly that, that came up as a big theme. And then the last 2 are really things that, each and every day, these are things, well, maybe not every day, but keep in mind, these are things that we can be doing all the time. I am not over exaggerating to say that we're talking about EPR because companies are on the hot seat about plastics. And that's because you have called them, your friends have called them, you've put it on Facebook, other social media, like the world is complaining about plastics and companies are listening. So absolutely, when you call a company and say, what is this crap packaging you're using? They do listen and it does matter. So please continue to do that. And lastly, please help us spread the word. So EPR is going to be a big change. It's going to be a tough bill. There's going to be lots of moving parts. And we are trying to really build support, not just within the recycling community, but we're trying to get climate equity groups on board, chambers of commerce, sustainable businesses. If you have ideas of groups that we can share this with, groups that should be involved in this conversation, please let us know. This is it's definitely much bigger than recycling, and we are all ears to folks that you think should hear this, that can help move this along. So we will follow up with the slides and some more tips on these take action, some links and things like that. And got plenty of time for questions, but last thing we wanted to add was a huge thank you, applause, all of you for being here, for all the great work that you do as eco leaders. It is honestly a privilege to be able to talk to you, to hear your great questions, the chat and everything, to see people excited, asking great questions about this. So thank you for supporting all the great work that we do. And with that, we are around for a while to answer questions. So let's dive right into that.
So I've seen a couple come up about PROs. So I just want to say a few more things to clarify that. PROs, again, the producer responsibility organizations. Couple questions came up about Hickley. One asked if there was more than one operating, and it really depends on how the particular EPR is written, but in most cases there is one. You know, the legislation says there needs to be a PRO that will handle this material or group of materials in the case of packaging. And then there may be multiple PROs that kind of bid for that job, but there's one that is selected and ends up being the one that then operates it for that state or province. Someone asked what is going to keep the producers from putting, you know, their favorite people on that PRO. They can put whoever they want on the PRO to operate on their behalf. What they can't do is handpick who's going to be on the government body that oversees them. So that's again going to be someone like a Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, or maybe a subgroup that CDPHE is going to oversee. And often that'll also be written into the legislation that says the oversight body has this many nonprofit people and this many waste haulers and this many of this kind of person and this many of this kind of person. So there is government stipulation that helps to make sure that everything stays unbiased and works on behalf of the population. So hopefully that clarifies those questions. Rosie, did you see other ones pop up that you wanted to highlight, or did you?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if you guys wanted, not like that you're not presenting, if you wanted to pick some or if you wanted me to. I think the top one that people upvoted was, how can EPR be leveraged to address food waste? Which we did talk a little bit about at our last 2.0 training on food waste, actually. And I can send out that link if you're interested.
Yeah, food waste is a good question. I would say that EPR probably, well, EPR does not directly address food waste. So this is a great example of where EPR is part of a circular economy, but it's not the whole gamut. It's not everything we'd love to see: improving recycling, food waste reduction, things like that. So in many ways, food waste reduction is kind of a complementary bucket. But one of the things we haven't talked about, which does impact food waste a little bit, is bioplastics. So right now, you know, many of you know that there's not a lot of composting programs across the country. Less than 5% of households have access to composting food scraps. But there's an increasing number of companies using compostable products for their food packaging. And so that is something we're exploring with EPR. You know, so far we've talked about just funding the recycling system, but to be honest, we need to do a lot more work on composting. So it makes sense to roll composting into this equation as well, and have the companies that produce compostable products help pay for composting infrastructure and composting collection programs. And so we're in the early stages of discussion on that. No one has actually done that around the world yet, but like I said, when you're late to the party, you can, you know, add on and kind of leapfrog some of what's already been done. So hoping to maybe include that in our Colorado bill as we move forward, because you know, increasing composting collection will also help with food waste recovery. So definitely lots of work to be done there as well.
There was another question or comment about what is recyclable depends on what mills are available locally. I jotted some notes, I don't have the full question, but that's a great point, is what's recyclable depends on what markets are available and what can be processed, or how easily you can get those materials to a market that wants to process them. And through an EPR, you have the benefit of having the collection streamlined and the materials guaranteed. So it's easier to attract those markets to the area. And it's also easier than to ship larger quantities to processors and markets, because you're not doing it one small community at a time, you're doing it with a whole state's worth of recycled goods. So even if the mills aren't local, it's easier to get them there in a cost-effective manner. And like Kate was saying earlier, that when you have that guaranteed material stream, you're going to be bringing businesses in that want to be using that material because they know it's there.
So I'm seeing a question about a conflict of interest from producers, and that's a great question. There is a little bit of, I'm going to say, risk of putting the producers in charge of the recycling system, and that's, I think, where we need to tread carefully. We've seen some EPR programs get a little off course, maybe is a way to say that. Companies sometimes are more interested in investing in incineration and burning the plastics than actually having them recycled. And so a really good EPR policy has to have really strong government oversight, and it has to have stakeholder engagement. So it can't just be turning the whole system over to the producers and trusting that they're going to do the right thing. It does make sense to give them the responsibility if they're footing the bill for it. But making sure that they work within the parameters of the system, that there's accountability, that there's transparency, and that there are adjustments that can be made if it's not going correctly. So I think that's a great point to bring up. It's not entirely giving it to them and walking away, but it's certainly giving them the lion's share of their responsibility and then making sure that they play by the right rules.
I'm seeing some several about kind of refilling, reusing, and how that might fit into EPR rather than just recycling and reducing the packaging itself.
So some EPR programs do have reduce refill targets. What's what we would like to see. There's a fair amount of pushback from companies on that, but one really good way to drive at it is that fee on the product, right, and the type of packaging. So for example, if you have an aluminum can that's highly recyclable, you're going to pay a very little fee, like let's say 1/100 of a penny. If you have a styrofoam container that's very hard to recycle, you might pay more like 1/10 of a penny or 1/3 of a penny or something like that. One approach is to say that reusable containers don't have to pay the fee at all because they're reused. So it's a financial incentive for companies to invest in reusable products. It's a little bit indirect, so I would say it's not the strongest way to go at it. So I think there are other complementary policies that are a better approach to driving more reuse and refill.
I see a comment or a question here saying, I think the most obvious counter argument to EPR policies is that once a consumer buys a product, it becomes their own responsibility to pay for handling waste. What is the first strongest point you'd recommend in response to this point? I would say my first response that I can think of is that so often it is confusing and hard for a consumer to figure out how to responsibly recycle. It's not an individual thing that they can do. You know, it's not like having an apple peel that you can easily put in your backyard and compost yourself. You've got plastic packaging. That's not something that's easy for an individual consumer to do. And it needs to be a systemic change. And there also needs to be coordination to make like we were saying earlier, to make it so that the products themselves are easier to recycle, so that it is a very distinct list of things that are easier to recycle. But I'm curious if any of my colleagues have other responses to that question.
I'm seeing a question from Shirley about whether we have a model EPR law that has been created, which we do not yet. We are still in the process of looking at what's happening in other states, trying to figure out what might work best for us and waiting for those recommendations from CBPHE. So we hope to have more of a draft, probably, the beginning of a draft, maybe the middle of the summer, and definitely would love some feedback on that.
People have several questions about how bottle bills fit into EPR and how they interact. Are they the same? What can we do?
Right. We probably should have talked about bottle bills. They are also another great policy, and they were the original example of producer responsibility, right? So you're putting you're embedding the cost of recycling into the price of the product. You're giving people a financial incentive to recycle, and you're putting producers in charge of having to manage that system. So there are 10 states, I believe, now with bottle bills, and it is probably best said to be complementary. So an EPR policy can often include a bottle bill, or what it can do is it could set targets that say, you have to recycle 90% of plastic bottles or 90% of aluminum cans, and then leave it up to the companies to determine the best way to do that. And to be honest, that is the best way to do it. So we see a lot of the producer responsibility programs in Europe adopting bottle bills as the way to meet the producer responsibility targets, because it really is the most effective way to get the beverage containers back. But really one of the benefits of EPR is that it covers packaging as an entire stream. And one of the arguments against bottle deposit programs is that really just deals with a small subset of materials, really just beverage containers. And so we really need to look at the entire recycling system as a whole. So not sure, whether or not what we have in Colorado will tie in with the bottle bill, if it will be complementary. We're seeing EPR in Oregon, for example, will complement the state's great bottle bill already. So it's definitely an evolving conversation, and definitely bottle bills are a great tool for increasing participation in recycling.
Great. We do have a question about TerraCycle. Oh, if you have something else to say about bottle bills.
Oh no, I was gonna pull up a different question. I thought this one's pretty quick though. So there's a question about rural areas having higher expenses for recycling. That is absolutely one of the biggest problems with recycling, is that, here in the Boulder, Denver area, we've got so many people, it's a dense population, that we can collect a whole lot of materials really easily. But you've got a place, out in Alamosa or Aspen, it's a lot harder, a lot more costly for them to get that same material to the processors, because they've got to drive it a lot farther than we do. So it is a bigger expense under the system we have now, where those rural municipalities are having to pay for their own recycling. And that's one of those great things about an EPR policy, is that the PRO has got to figure out how to get that material to the urban centers, or to incentivize businesses to go to those places to make sure that there is recycling for the rural folks as well as the urban folks. And that all comes out of the funds that they pay.
Yeah, and I will say that in Oregon, the way they're looking to address it is that they're going to pay rural areas more for recycling because they know it costs more. So in order to get a statewide list of what's recyclable, they realize it's going to be more expensive for the rural areas. So cool to see that kind of thinking going along. And so in addition to Oregon as the model, I'm seeing some great comments about California moving forward with some EPR policies and similar tools. So they're definitely a great example as well. And Tom is asking about a country that's furthest along with EPR. There's a lot. So British Columbia is a great example. Canada has a number of systems. They've got Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia, and they're looking to standardize that. Germany has been a great model. Belgium is a great model. France has a great model of eco-modulation. So, definitely some of the European countries and some spots in Canada are great. But I will also say, like, Colorado is a great model just with our paint program, right? So it's not packaging, but we have a great EPR program for paint working here. So it is a strong foundation that we can build from and a really tangible example we can point to in our own backyard.
Cool. Do you guys want to touch on the complicated world of TerraCycle?
Sure. Always get questions about TerraCycle. TerraCycle, for anyone who's not familiar with it, collects lots of different hard to recycle materials. They often have collection boxes that they will send you, and they will take candy wrappers, cigarette butts, markers, tape dispensers, all sorts of different things. They're an interesting model. The materials do get recycled, but it's not really a scalable solution. It's often the costs are borne by the people trying to recycle it. And TerraCycle is able to find uses for those materials. They're not transparent, which has been one of our complaints. We've called a number of times and tried to say what happens with the materials. And we get some pretty vague answers. But from what we have been able to determine in talking to them and others, materials are typically ground up and they're mixed together, and they may be used for filling in like playground equipment or things like that. They tend to be a one-off kind of product application. And so, it's helpful that the materials are getting recycled. It's helpful that they're calling attention to the need to recycle some of these things, but it's not a long-term solution. It's not a scalable solution. And so we have been, I'm going to say, a little bit of a reluctant supporter of it. We'd like to see producers take more responsibility. We'd like to see some of those products designed better. And we think that there's some questions about the transportation of shipping those kinds of materials. I will say that, when I was in the Netherlands, I was able to tour some of their recycling facilities, and they have charms over in the Netherlands. It was the coolest thing. And that's where everyone goes in the community to drop off their hard to recycle stuff. They take a little bit more stuff than we do. But that kind of like community drop-off center might be a better model than shipping some of those materials back. It's hard to say. So like I said, kind of a mixed reaction on TerraCycle is the short story.
And they also have kind of multiple programs, like they have you pay to recycle all your crap, but also they have like certain brand partnerships, and then they also have Loop, of course.
Yes, and I will say Loop is fantastic. So if you're not familiar with Loop, TerraCycle launched them a couple of years ago. It is a refill reuse program that's done through e-commerce. And it is incredibly exciting because it is the first time that all of the major brands have really invested in trying to make reuse work. So super exciting to see, Colgate Palmolive and Haagen-Dazs and General Mills trying to build reusable transport. So yes, just like Ian said, it's the milkman model, right? So they drop off the box of stuff at your front door. You use the containers. When you're done, you put them back in the box. They pick them up, they wash them, refill them, sanitize them, and on to the next customer. So it's a really cool opportunity. And it's really cool also to think about, we're all living in a world where e-commerce has radically transformed how we shop. And so what is the opportunity for brands to take their packaging back when you buy from them again, or something like that? So definitely lots of cool stuff happening on the reuse side of things.
And if you're in Boulder, there's a local company that does that called Nude Foods, by the way. Okay, let's see. So we got some questions about sending, like literally sending the stuff back to the manufacturing so that they physically have to take responsibility for it. Thoughts?
That would probably be ideal, except that I would worry about the transportation footprint. I mean, in some ways it does make sense to aggregate and then ship back, or to not ship back and to, you know, reuse those materials again locally. So, you know, the cardboard box is something we could recycle here into more paper, or, you know, the glass we can recycle here in Colorado rather than shipping it back to a brewery across the country. So I think that kind of direct responsibility is something that is key. And EPR tries to get as close to that as we can, while also recognizing that there are some, you know, efficiencies in collecting multiple materials at the same time.
Awesome. We also got questions about are there examples of using EPR against a single company like Amazon, for example, because we've been seeing so many mailers.
We do see some companies doing voluntary EPR where they'll step up and they'll say, you can send your packaging back to us and we will get it recycled. So kind of similar to a TerraCycle, but on an individual company level. So that's always a good start. Have not seen something targeted to a particular company, because I really think you want the whole. It's also not fair necessarily to target it on one company. You want the whole industry on board. You don't want, you know, if we target Amazon and Amazon starts doing the right thing, then, you know, Walmart, whoever's also shipping containers, is just going to look cheaper and they're going to have more sales. And what companies want more than anything is for all of their competitors to have to play by the same rules. They want what's called a level playing field. So if they're going to be regulated, it has to be that everyone across the board is regulated the same way. So they all have to play by the same rules.
Yeah. Points. What about Augustina is asking about your you had mentioned you had conversations with Coca-Cola and other like really huge brands like that, and we're so excited that we had the opportunity to do that. So she's asking if you can share more about what those conversations were like. I know that you had talked about, you know, this shift in perspective and mood from these producers, but yeah, do they want to meet the bare minimum, or are they? You already talked a little bit about this, but
yeah, it's a super exciting conversation. So the EcoCycle is part of a group called the U.S. Plastics Pact. It is a multi-stakeholder initiative. So it's recyclers, it's all the big brands, Walmart, Coca-Cola, Molson Coors from the local level. There's cities and government on there. It's led by the World Wildlife Fund and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the Recycling Partnership. And what's exciting is that it's really the first time we've gotten together as a big group, as the whole supply chain, to talk about how to fix recycling. And I know a lot of you have called us and were like, don't you talk to designers about how to make it more recyclable? And it's great to actually be talking to them in the same room now, or at least on the same screen. So we're just in the early stages of having this policy conversation. We've identified that extended producer responsibility is needed. We have not gotten into the details of what that looks like just yet, but certainly we can provide some background information. There's been some great publications that some of the brands have put out to express their support for EPR. The American Beverage Association is a big spokesperson for all of the Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Peppers of the world, and they have come out and said, you know, they're supporting EPR principles. The Consumer Brands Association has come out with a lot of that. So it's great to see some of those companies leading the conversation. And again, part of it is that they already do this in Canada and in Europe. So it's about time they start to do it in the US. It's great to finally see them come together as a partner in moving this forward.
Yeah. Michelle had a great question, which how does the oil and gas company, or how does the oil and gas industry fit into this, as they are providing plastics essentially?
Great question. Yeah, so it's ideally there would also be something that targets the oil and gas, like the actual plastic producer. Unfortunately, EPR only targets the company, the brands, but those brands are the direct buyer from those plastic producers. So it is a way to pressure those oil and gas companies. So for example, EPR is going to drive more recycled content and less virgin fossil fuels. So it's the opportunity for companies to say, I need more recycled plastic in my bottle. You need to supply that to me. So it is something that ripples up the supply chain. It's definitely not a fix for oil and gas. I think that's where, you know, we can start to look at carbon taxes. There have been talks of a plastic tax actually on the producer, the chemical company level. So EPR, again, it's not, it does a lot of great things, but it's not a silver bullet. And you're right that there definitely needs to be more work to address oil and gas and their growing investment in plastics production.
All right. So cartons are recyclable, like a juice carton, a milk carton, so soup carton. I almost said soap soup. Is that an example of EPR?
Carton recycling is a great example of companies stepping up and taking responsibility. So it's on the path toward EPR. So for a little bit of background, cartons came out, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, and they were not recyclable because there's foil and there's paper and there's plastic on the outside. You all know that they're complicated. So there was a lot of pushback for this non-recyclable product. But at the same time, cartons don't need to be refrigerated. So there's actually great environmental savings by not having refrigerated trucks on the road, and they're longer shelf life. So overall, cartons are a good product. So the carton manufacturers got together on their own, so voluntarily, and they said, we need to address this recycling issue. And they started putting together some funding, and they started giving grants to places like the Boulder County Recycling Center to invest in the infrastructure, the people, the equipment to recycle cartons. And they also started to build end markets. So what could those cartons be used for? Who could take them and actually do the recycling to make them into a new product? So they started building up mills across the country that would accept cartons. So we had a place to send them because we can't just collect it. We have to have a place to send it. So cartons now are about 60% of the country has access to carton recycling. So it's a great model. It has some shortcomings in that it is voluntary. It doesn't support really the ongoing costs of carton recycling. It's really just infrastructure funding. And there's nothing to say that carton producers have to participate. So there's been some great players and there's been some that are laggards, and that's not really fair to those, not doing the right thing. So it's definitely a great example of kind of where we want to go and the kind of thing that we want to build upon and make the status quo for all these materials.
Yeah. Okay, 2 questions about the plastic ban. So someone said, how long do you estimate this could take to actually be in place? Is it likely to pass? Is Polis supportive? Randy might know more about this. Our other coworker who works specifically on this, personally, I don't know.
I will say that it is, it's building off the bills that we had last year. So my understanding is that there's been a lot of work to get the governor on board. My understanding is that he is on board, although don't quote me on that, but that's my vague understanding. We don't know really what this session is going to look like, right? There's still a lot of unknowns about this session overall. We are optimistic about the bill. We think it's a great bill, but certainly it's going to be a battle to get it across the finish line. And so definitely going to use your support, but I think our chances are pretty good at this point.
And I, just to clarify, you guys, I can send, like, you can continue to send in questions. I'll send a big follow-up email after this. I'll send it tomorrow with the recording and the slides and the stuff that we've written up together in the Q&A and chat. And if there's a question that we didn't answer, like, I can ask Randy to give us more information. I can send it out, so that we don't have to stop talking here. Okay. Get that one. Oh, this is from Hannah. What do you think about EPR exclusion for smaller companies? Is it set up properly? How do we scale it?
The exclusions that I've seen on smaller companies have really been based on sales volumes. There were a couple of them that mentioned things like.
Rachel, you're really quiet. Can you get closer?
I think my headphones are moving better. Can you hear me a little better?
It seems like it's maybe a little unplugged or something. We're good for the whole thing.
Right. Is that
There you go.
better?
Oh.
Okay.
Maybe not.
All right. Kate, why don't you take this one?
All right. Yeah. So what we've seen is that there seems to be a kind of a standard exemption for small businesses. Generally, I think it's under $1 million in revenue and less than 1 ton of product. So that's what we're seeing across the country. We've not done any kind of outreach with small businesses, small producers, to see if that feels right, especially in Colorado. So definitely that will be part of our stakeholder outreach. But I think it's just meant to, not put additional burden on some of the small companies, especially some of the startups. So it seems to be pretty par for the course, but certainly something we'll look into more.
Let's see. Dee Dee says that she works hard to try to reduce her plastic use, but some of it just comes in plastic. There's only so much you can do. So this is what I commented a little bit about this in the chat box, and we talked about how yeah, absolutely, you shouldn't feel guilty because the food you need to survive comes in plastic, because it's the system that's built around us. And this is what we talked a lot about in our circular economy 2.0, about, like, you need to survive, so don't feel bad because you didn't create this problem. So you can avoid plastic and vote with your dollar as much as you possibly can, but obviously that's not an accessible solution for a lot of folks. So that's why exactly EPR is important, because there's only so much you can do as an individual consumer. So creating the systemic solutions goes hand in hand with that, because I think a lot of times all of this is framed as an individual problem when you did not create the problem. Any other comments on that one, guys? I say that like 20 times a day. Okay. I think we've talked about scaling EPR, or I think we've talked about EPR on a national level throughout, but do you guys have any other thoughts about that? I'm trying to wrap up some of the questions.
Yeah, I mean, I will just say that Europe has 24 different EPR schemes for all the different countries. So it can be done more on a state, smaller country level, or it can be done nationally. Europe does have really great overarching targets, and then it lets each individual country figure out how to meet those. So that might be the approach we take in the US. It's, for those of you who've lived in different states, waste and recycling collection is radically different in different states, right? In the East Coast, for example, it's mostly run by cities, and out here it's mostly run by private companies. And so it is a little bit hard to have a standardized system. We have 10,000 different recycling systems across the US. So we definitely need to streamline, but my guess is we're going to end up going state by state, at least to start on this.
Yeah. Okay, you guys. Well, we've put Kate and Rachel through a lot of questions. They have provided so much good information, and I'm so excited. Like, I learned a lot. I hope you guys did too. And thank you all for being so engaging and asking so many questions and making so many great comments in the chat box. We do have some hanging questions, so we will make sure to capture all of the chat, so because you guys expressed that you wanted to save that, and the Q&A box. So I'll send out a big follow-up email hopefully tomorrow if I can get all the stuff together. So it'll have the recording, the slide deck, and then a whole bunch of information about some of the stuff that we've talked about, especially the follow-up actions that you can take. And then some of the answers of these questions that we maybe didn't get to. And then I just want to let you know that the invitations for this webinar came from my email. It's just rosie@ecocycle.org. So if you have follow-up questions or there's something else you want to talk about, you can absolutely just email me directly. And the follow-up email will come from that email as well, so you'll have it. So please don't think that we're leaving you hanging. You can direct your questions and comments to me afterward and we can continue chatting. So thank you so much again. I know it's kind of late now, so I hope you all get to go eat some dinner or the snack or go to bed or whatever you'd like to do. Kate and Rachel, do you have any parting comments?
Thanks so much for being here tonight and for your excitement about this and recycling.
Absolutely. Great questions, great audience. Super excited to have such great folks as supporters of EcoCycle. And please help us get EPR for packaging here going in Colorado. So we're going to have a lot of work in front of us and look forward to having you all help us along the way. So thank you.